orchestrally significant about it. Right? It's great, but it doesn't say, I'm going to distinguish between what a flute means and what a viola means. Wagner, on the other hand, used all these resources, and as I say, he wasn't content with the existing instruments, so he invented the Wagner tubas to create the effect that he wasn't able to create from the existing instruments. When he had Bayreuth built, thank you, King Ludwig, he made sure that the orchestra was sitting underneath the stage, and this otherworldly sound would come up not right in front of the audience, between the audience and the stage, but actually from behind. So the orchestra became like the soul of the opera, not always visible, but always essential.
And he had to do that because he also used much larger orchestras than anyone had in the past.
Huge.
Which is a big difference to Verdi, to Wagner.
Right.
Jeanne-Michèle,
Darling.
it's obvious from the way you speak that you are connected to the entire opera. But is there any particular part that really is your favorite, that moves you the most, that you look forward to singing?
I have to say, of course, the Liebestod after the whole night is the most magic moment of all. But I really love the part he played, the love duet with Tristan. I love how he weaves the voices and the orchestra. And to me, the orchestra is multiple voices. It's not one soloist. It's another 100 soloists into the voices. But when we get to the point where we sit down, usually, and we sing So stürbe nicht, that to me is also one of the just most incredible moments.
This might be touching on a sensitive...
And I know you know that opera.
This may be touching on a sensitive area, but how important is it who your Tristan is and how much you connect with him?
I consider myself an actor, and I find a way to connect with all different Tristans. And I've had Tristans that were older than my grandfather and 4 times as large. And I have one I've sung with a lot who's a fabulous singer who's about this tall, and he's a block with a block head on top of it. But as that particular Tristan, whom I adore as a human being, said to me, he said, when you look at me on stage, it's like no one's looked at me like that since I was in college. His wife. And I said, but it ends when I leave the stage. Just so we're clear.
Edgar, you had a question.
You talked about leitmotif. You just played from Rigoletto, and the phrase that you played Rigoletto is used throughout
As a leitmotif.
as a leitmotif.
Yes.
Which Verdi took
From Wagner. And okay, so Rigoletto was written in the very early 1850s, shortly after Lohengrin and Tannhäuser. Verdi had huge respect for Wagner, but he said, I keep him at a great distance. Because for Verdi, he said, this Germanic, fantastical way of thinking will never be the way to reach us Italians who are basically simple. However, as you absolutely correctly point out, Verdi took what was simple enough that his audiences would grasp it. And as I say, once Wagner began to transform the world of opera, there was no turning back. So the fact that what initially is the Duke's song, when he says women are changeable, becomes, in the final act of Rigoletto, the motif that the jester hears off stage that makes him know he hasn't had the Duke killed, he's had his own daughter killed. So yeah, Wagner's influence extended to Verdi, even though Verdi was very cautious and kept personal. They were born in the same year, by the way. They were completely contemporary. Both born in 1813. But Verdi kept his respectful distance all of his life. Yes, sir.
I have a two-part question, if I may.
You may.
Okay. First of all, I'm just curious about the diminished, the half.
The half diminished.
Or the diminished sounded with the half. You know, who of the contemporaries were using this? And I noticed there's some in there that have a flat ninth.
That also happens, which is less rare, by the way. That you could find all the way through Bach. And but the half diminished seventh of course, was used by all these composers. You can't look at a work by Bizet or Meyerbeer or whatever and not find it, or even earlier. But it's Wagner's insistence upon it and his use of it as an arrival point rather than as a passing point that makes this musical language so different. Many people have said Tristan is the work that is the changing point from traditional harmony to modern music. Now, no single work can bear that responsibility, but you can see why a work where the arrival points have no specific key paves the way for atonality or all kinds of other musical languages that are not key dependent. And you had a second question.
So, thank you for that, by the way, because I'm a jazz musician, so
Well, we owe jazz to Wagner, basically. Yeah. Just saying, yeah.
in the plaintive song there, is that supposed to have been based on some kind of folkloric thing that the flute player?
I don't think so. I think that, like a lot of other music, do you know the answer to that?
I think it is not an actual tune. I
It's
think
not an
he
actual tune,
wrote it.
but I think that
Like the
other
sailor
composers
song in the
too
beginning.
have found ways to make things that sound like vernacular, although they're actually original compositions. Like Wagner, I'll get you in 1 second. He has a hunting tune. You remember I said King Mark and all of his hunters go out. So there's this. Well, actually, that's a big ninth chord too, isn't it? So hunters didn't really play jazz chords, but but Wagner takes something that is motivic, uses a hunting tune, and then incorporates it into his own richer harmonic world. Sir.
Thank you. That's quite all right. I was just interested also in the effect of Tristan at the time it was written. I mean, we've heard much of it now again, although you make it terrifically fresh. I mean, they claimed it drove tenors insane.
And died, right? Tenors actually died singing it, yeah.
They
I've had a few of those.
singing it, people got headaches, women passed out. Another
Right,
thing.
right.
When they did this, I mean, even today it has a tremendous power. I was just asking, when you sing it or you conduct it or play it, does it still have that power to you? I don't want anyone to go insane, but
Or die.
Shall I?
Please.
I think that it's a very good question. We don't go insane or die, but really the handful of people that sing this repertoire is very specialized because it takes incredible stamina, as we know, much longer than anything that had been written. Well, Meyerbeer did that before. Very long operas.
But
longer
Meyerbeer
than
had more
everything.
characters
More
and gave
characters.
everybody a break.
And the orchestra is so huge. And then, of course, emotionally, it takes you to a different place, which is probably why they went crazy and died.
The other thing that, one sec, everybody recognized when they heard this opera with its surging and its chromaticism and its rich harmonies that it was sexual. That was clear. Clara Schumann heard it and she said his unbridled and overt sexuality kills this piece. Because, you know, there were different kinds of romantics. There were the romantics like Brahms and Schumann who were looking back over their shoulders at a classicism, capital C, classical kind of music writing, and doing their best to blend those two. Then there were the composers like Wagner and Liszt who really only were moving away. Not that they didn't have huge admiration for Beethoven, they did. But they did not want to try to blend those. They wanted to forge their own paths. And in Wagner's case, finding this sensual musical language was a key part of what he was exploring in the fullest way that he could. Yes, sir.
I'd heard that he'd taken a break from the writing of The Ring so that he could try to earn some money with them all.
Yes. Well, I don't think that it was more popular. The Ring has the most amazing gestation in that he wrote the 4 operas libretto first in reverse order. So Siegfried's Tod, which we now know as Götterdämmerung, came in the late 1840s. And the whole poem was written, and he published the set just as literature with not a note of music to make some money.
So how long did it take for audiences to appreciate Tristan?
Well, so the work itself was composed in 1859. It wasn't put on until 6 years later in 1865 with Bülow, thank you very much, the former husband of his wife, conducting, because the singer said this is impossible, the orchestra said this is unplayable. So before we even get to the public, we have the musicians themselves saying, this is crazy, what is he thinking? So it took a long time for Wagner's works to come to reality.
So when it comes to the two diminished chords that you mentioned the minor third having a play.
Well, okay.
But you hurt my feelings because you didn't mention the tritone,
Okay.
which I think has even more.
But what is a tritone?
It's
Two minor thirds, right? Okay, so here's a diminished seventh. And the thing about diminished sevenths, sorry all of you who don't care about this, but I'll do it fast. There's 12 major chords, there's 12 minor chords. You know, if you split an octave into X pieces, there'll be X major chords. But there'll only be 3 diminished chords because this one, and this one is all we got, because then we're back to the first one. That's why I say they can serve so many purposes, they can go to so many things. The tritone is the addition of 2 minor thirds, and even as long ago as Plato, he said that is an immoral interval and will cause, right? He wrote that down just so you wouldn't mess around with immoral intervals. And the tritone is crucial to this. But Wagner was trying to write something not immoral, but something that was insatiable, a longing that would not be resolved. Tristan and Isolde's love is only resolved in death. Wagner didn't include this in the opera, but the old legends say that although they were buried in separate graves at King Mark's insistence, the plants, the vines growing out of the graves intertwined. So that tritone only gets resolved after death. Yes, sir.
Could you play the Tristan chord and then demonstrate how it gets resolved at the end of the opera?
Yeah. Okay, now, we hear this. I'm shortening the overture. So we're not in a key. Nicest 12-tone melody ever written. Here's the B major at the end of what Tovey called the most beautifully orchestrated B major chord ever written. So that's the 60-second version of Tristan and Isolde for people in a hurry. Okay. Thank you. We're going to go have cookies, but if there are questions we haven't answered, we'll be out there. Oh, Beth Mooney, where are you? Would you rise so we can acknowledge your wonderful baking, please?